separation from Chuma. He's going to get it off to Bayer. Clement Bayer! Right by Nakajima and into a wide open goal. Kane has it stopped by Wilden. Jr. Deflating moments in the first minute of added time.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the CPL Newsroom presented by Volkswagen. I'm not Christian Jack. I'm Charlie O'Connor-Clark, filling in for KJ as he enjoys a few very well-deserved days off this week. We're officially at the quarter mark of the 2023 CPL season with the 4 matches of Week 7 in the books. And we'll just jump right into them. Some interesting results. If we bring up the results board here, Atletico Ottawa hosting Forge FC in a CPL Final rematch. And pretty much the same result with David Chouanière scoring late to win it for Forge. Pacific FC 1, Halifax Wanderers 1. Nigel Reed scoring for Pacific before Aidan Daniels equalizer late for the Wanderers on the road. York United getting that first win at home against Cavalry FC thanks to an early Clement Bahia goal in the first half. And then rounding out the weekend, Vancouver FC and Valor FC. Neither of them able to score a goal that ended up counting, unfortunately. So those sides settle for a 0-0, and that's going to be where we start the show this week out in Langley. We'll welcome in Benedict Rhodes here to break us down, an interesting 0-0 draw, but ultimately a second straight 0-0 for Vancouver. Benedict, overall, what would you give this match out of 10 in terms of how compelling it was?
I'll give it a 6. It wasn't the most memorable game of soccer, of course, but there's some good moments. The performance of TJ Tahid, we'll talk about, was fantastic to see. 16 years old, and both teams had their chances in this game. Just neither team could really take advantage of them. Unfortunately, if you're watching on YouTube, you just saw there Mamadou Kane. Just don't think he knew much about it, but the ball sort of hit him in the face and went on target. He fell off the crossbar, and then in the second half, if you're watching on YouTube, still here Anthony Novak does put the ball in the back of the net, but it gets ruled off for an alleged handball, and Novak again in the final seconds of the second half, he hits the crossbar with the header from a corner. So both teams had their chances in this game. Both, I think, will feel as though, in a way it is a point gained, but in a way it's also 2 points dropped for both teams.
Absolutely. We'll get to some of those individuals in a minute, but as I said, that's 2 straight 0-0s for Vancouver FC. I think there's a lot of resilience, obviously, in the defensive performances, especially with some of the injuries they've had the last couple of weeks. But Benedict, what have you thought of their performances lately, especially in this game? I think there were some maybe interesting changes in the lineup as well, right?
Yeah, I think it's the defense is just the building block for your entire team, right? If you can keep clean sheets, you're always going to give your team a chance, and I think that's been a very strong positive for Vancouver over these last couple of games. Playing against 2 teams, Forge FC away and Valor FC at home, 2 difficult teams to play against, and to hold them to 0 goals, I think it is promising. But they'll want to start getting things going in attack. I think in the previous 2 games against Forge and Ottawa, I think they had 0 shots on target in both games. So that did change in this game, but they're going to want to start boosting that up a bit more and start putting the ball in the back of the net.
Yeah, and I think the goals are always kind of the hardest part to put together with a team that's just come together this year. So maybe that is something that comes later in the season. Before we move on to Valor, though, let's hear from one of those Vancouver FC players who's played, I think, almost every minute for them with Elliot Simmons.
Yeah, I think, being a brand new team, it's tough coming into a league where, teams have been around for 5 years and they've sort of built that identity over the years. So I think, we have our plans on what we want to do. We've got to, keep sticking to the game plans, to keep the trust in what we're doing. And I think sort of week by week it's coming on now, but I think now we can relax a bit more and start showing what we can do on the ball a bit more.
As for Valor, Benny, I'll get your thoughts on them in a second, but before we do that, I want to just hear from their coach, Phil Dos Santos. They've got 5 draws in 7 games now, I think. Let's hear what their boss had to say after that game.
I I think we started the game well. I actually think we started the game well. I think that, when you dominate possession in today's game, you'll always have to deal with moments of transition. They were extremely direct. They played with their tools, with what they had, and I felt that today the only thing that we didn't get was the goal. Apart from that, I can't fault the guys. I could fault them for maybe a little bit of lack of clarity and the moments where they needed to decide better, maybe execute better. But again, this is the game, and if we look at the whole 90 minutes, if there's a team that wins the game, anyone else but us, it would mean that football is a sport that we know that sometimes could be unfair. So, but credit to them, they fought. We knew they would, and that's it.
Phil Dos Santos mentioning that they started well and that maybe the only thing that didn't go Valor's way in this game was that goal. Benny, you watched this game. They put the ball on the net a couple times. It didn't count. Did you think Valor did enough to win this game?
I believe so. They had an expected goals of over 1.5. They hit the crossbar a couple times. You said they did put the ball in the back of the net in the second half, and I think they probably feel a little bit hard done by that not counting. And I think Vancouver at the same time probably also felt that they probably did enough to win. But I think Valor will be the team who come away from this game maybe just a little bit more disappointed that they weren't able to pick up the maximum 3 points.
Yeah, I think so as well. In terms of the individual performances in this game, I think there were a few that were impressive and commendable. But Benny, I know that you identified a few, so just tell us which players from this game stood out above the rest. Which individual performances for you?
Yeah, one of them was TJ Tahid, the young 16-year-old winger from Maple Ridge, I believe it's called, BC, just about 20 minutes away from Langley. So he was fantastic in this game. He's going up and down the wing. He was involved defensively as well. I think he won possession back the most times of anyone in Vancouver. So he was impressive. For Valor, the two wingers again, Keane Williams and Pacific Nyangabir, they're both fantastic again. A lot of what Valor does goes through those wide channels, and both of them are very involved in this game as well. And Callum Murphy made a couple of big saves. One of them was on a play that was offside, so it didn't actually count as a save, but it was a fantastic reaction save that would have kept the team in the game had it been onside. So those three are always impressive, and we're again on Sunday.
Absolutely. Pacific Nyangabir, I think we maybe talk about him every week on this show, but for me, he's becoming quite quickly one of the most impressive newcomers to the league this season. Really an entertaining player, a very direct player on the ball in that Valor attack, and it's something that they really needed. So that's fun. But going back to TJ Tahid, as you mentioned, Benedict, he is the youngest player in this league's history. He comes in for the start in this game as a 16-year-old, does very well, and his coach Afshin Gopi had a lot of praise for him after the game and what his story means for the sport in this country. So let's hear from him.
I think this is what this club is all about, is finding local talented players like TJ that are Canadian, and finding these young geniuses that need experience to play with senior players at the highest level in Canada to be able to develop themselves in a professional environment so they can reach their potential sooner. And Rob Friend, our ownership, myself, we had to take our profession outside of North America because there weren't enough opportunities in our generation. So I think it's wonderful that CPL is providing this platform, and it's so important to the development of Canadian national team and Canadian soccer and football. So TJ will hopefully be one of many, many players that will come out of our organization and help the Canadian football. And I think what's really brave in our club's part is that by putting 16-year-olds, 18-year-olds on the pitch, maybe we sacrifice results in the short term, but we gain so much in the long term.
Very well said, as always, from Afshin. And I just have to point out that is a sweet jacket he was wearing as well. I love that. I don't know where he got it, but I might have to ask him next time he's down here in Toronto. But Benny, these two teams both have 2 draws in a row. What's coming up next for these teams, and where what are the stories heading into their next games?
Yeah, both teams are playing the same teams they played in week 1 with a BC derby with Vancouver. Just this time hosting Pacific FC for the first time. So that's going to be the biggest storyline in that game. And then Valor FC back at home, back at IG Field, a place that they've played so well over the years, and they're hosting York United, who are coming off 2 wins in a row. They're playing Forge midweek, so they might be a lot of travel for them, but it's a good big game for them as well at IG Field on Sunday.
Yeah, that Vancouver Pacific game though in Langley, really exciting. We saw how good the away support was and the home support at that reverse fixture earlier in the year. I'm sure it's going to be another pretty fun one and an impressive one with a great atmosphere at Willoughby Park. Benedict, thank you so much for all of your incredible insight, and we'll make a substitution here and bring in Alex Gange-Ruzik as we stay in BC for a Pacific and Halifax draw. Obviously, as we mentioned earlier, Nigel Reed with his first CPL goal for Pacific canceled out by a late Halifax equalizer from Aiden Daniels. AGR, all overall out of 10, what would you give this game in terms of how compelling it was, and what were your general thoughts?
Yeah, I'd say probably around a 6, because I think overall it was a very bright start from Pacific. The host coming out, getting the goal. They were all over Halifax. Felt like they could have got a few more, and they looked like a team that was hungry for revenge after losing in CanChamp in midweek. But give credit to Halifax. They went down a goal. They're against one of the top teams in the league. They grew back into it and they fought, and Pacific just kind of ran out of gas, and at the end it was all one-way traffic for the Wanderers. So in terms of that, it was a very interesting split just to see Pacific's bright start and then just see how Halifax kind of took over the game. And overall these two teams usually play each other well, and I think this game was a great example of that.
It certainly was. You mentioned it being kind of one-way traffic for the Wanderers at the end. I think they tripled up Pacific in expected goals, shots, duels. They won a duels battle as well. I'm going to hear from you in a second on Halifax in particular, AGR. But before we do that, let's just go to their head coach, Patrice Geyser, and see what he had to say after this game. After we
to go back to even that point with all the draws, we have 15 players who are having first experience with CPL. We play a style that's going to get you punished, like the goals we've given up off the counter, but we're going to stick to the plan and keep playing. And because we have such a new group, we're going to continue to rotate guys to find the right fit. I thought hopefully the fans and everyone at home got to really enjoy it. I loved it. I thought we had a lot of great sequences, and for me that's what football really is about, the joy on the field. So we felt with Mass playing between lines and kind of playing as a false nine, we were going to be able to get more opportunities. And they're a great team with 2 top center backs, but I thought our plan really worked. And we had a total of 18 shots and 3 big chances, and unfortunately got 1 goal. But sometimes you're on the other hand and it goes the other way. But most importantly, this is a great statement from this young group coming off a really bad game. I think that's the message to the league, that we have our goals, and one of our goals is not to lose 2 games in a row. And I thought the guys were brilliant and very brave tonight.
Patrice mentioning that it is a big statement for them coming off that really brutal home loss to York United last weekend. AGR, overall, what did you think of Halifax in this game, and do you think that they're happy with the point from that?
Yeah, I think it was ultimately a good bounce back, a tough road environment, one of the toughest teams, to play away. Pacific is. I think it was good. Obviously, the return of Lorenzo Caligari helped a lot, and you kind of saw what they were missing a bit in midfield against York, where they were a bit just too passive and easy to play through. And I think that was a huge adjustment. I thought they defended also very well. And, what was nice about Halifax is just how they grew and how they responded. If you look at all their past games, they'd kind of grabbed leads and been so strong off the start, and they'd almost run out of gas and fade into the game. And, I think it was good as well to see that adversity of going down a goal and growing and hitting your second gear in that second half. Obviously, they probably would have liked to get a second goal for it, but I just like how they wore down Pacific. I think you could tell that the game plan was, okay, they played in midweek. Let's get their center backs to run a lot. Let's get their midfield to start to spread out and bring on these fresh legs. And I think that, overall, it's one where they'll be pleased with the point, at least a lot more pleased than Pacific would be.
Yeah, I think so too. And maybe if Halifax had a couple wins previously in the season, they'd be even more thrilled with the point there. But I do feel that a win is coming for them because they have impressed me at times under Patrice so far. Before we get more in the weeds on that midfield battle you mentioned, let's just hear from a pretty underrated, I think at this point, Halifax defender in Daniel Nimick.
Felt unlucky going in the first half down a goal. I think we bossed the possession, we bossed the chances. The goal just hadn't come. We just looked to carry that momentum into the second half. We knew they were going to sit back and try and hold on to that lead, so we just kept moving the ball, stayed patient, and eventually it came. And I think we were unlucky not to get more than one in that second half. That's what we wanted to do, but it didn't come, unfortunately.
So, AGR, you wrote in your analysis about the midfield battle in this game. Obviously, Halifax get Lorenzo Cavalry back this week. He was hugely missed in that York game the week before. And across from him is Sean Young. Both those two players are in the Gatorade Team of the Week for good reason. AGR, what did you see in the midfield battle in this game?
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of like a good boxing match, to use the fair analogy. I think it was something, if you'd go to the scorecards, the judges would have it about even. It was a lot of Pacific traffic in the first half, and Sean Young was orchestrating that. It was just that you could tell when their energy levels were there. Him and Aparicio were a menace, especially on the press. They caught Rampersad a few times in possession. They were able to get their goal came pretty much off a moment where they kind of dispossess Halifax, play through. Sean Young gets that final ball. He had a couple key passes, and I think that was a good, from Pacific, it was a good first half. You're sitting there, okay, this is a good organization. That Yates, Young, Aparicio midfield is a little more offensive than we're used to seeing with no Cedric Toussaint in the lineup. But then, to give credit to Halifax, they were just steady. Cavalry kind of led the way in that first half for his team. They were kind of weathering that storm, and in the second half they took over, and Cavalry was immense. Just the way he controls the tempo of the game and just pings the ball around. He's never really unbothered. What's nice about him from Halifax's perspective is if he has a meter of space, you can give him a ball and he'll turn and he'll make something. But even then, if Pacific was so drawn to him, they'd almost be hugging him, and it would open up space for between the lines, which was huge when Daniels came in, and just the way he's able to play in the line. So overall, I think it was something where it was a good battle. At halftime, I was thinking like, ooh, Pacific's kind of got the edge here, but Halifax stuck with it, and Cavalry was a big reason why.
Absolutely. I mean, it's amazing how much calmer that midfield looks with Cavalry at the base of it, how much better organized it is. I think everybody's making the better runs. But back to Pacific, Sean Young is a guy that's maybe having a bit of a breakout season here, right? He's played in every game, I think. He's, obviously an island boy coming into a much bigger responsibility in this team than he had in either of his previous years, especially with kind of filling a role that Jamar Dixon left behind with his retirement. James Merriman obviously had a lot of praise for the young midfielder, the literally Sean Young midfielder, after the game. So let's hear from the Pacific boss.
Biggest challenge for him this season was to add in the final third, to create assists, to create goals, to create chances. We've been working and developing him to become a true box-to-box 8. So I think we've seen that next level of development for him, which is exciting. He's working hard every day. His professionalism has been impressive this season. Big potential, and we're seeing it every match.
And another fantastic story of a young local player getting that chance at the pro game in the CPL. AGR, we've already mentioned a ton of individuals here, but are there any others that kind of stand out, any greats for you from this game in terms of individual performances?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, to start with the host, Pacific, obviously Sean Young was among it. And again, his growth game over game continues to impress me. The big thing about his performance is that he kind of was quiet midweek against the Whitecaps, which, is a bit frustrating from Pacific's perspective, a chance to showcase himself at that level. But, consistency in how you bounce back is also huge. So that was good to see. I also thought Kieran Basket did very well against his old club, saved Pacific, against Wesley Timoteo. We saw it in the highlights there around the 58th minute. That would have been a back-breaking goal. The way Halifax was trending, they score then. You have to feel they would have scored again and could have got the win. So huge from Basket, who overall had a great day, and the goal, not much he could say about that. And then, of course, up front, Nigel Reed. I just love the profile he brings. He's such a smart runner. And, Merriman kind of talked about it after the game as well, how, he's loved working with him just because he reads the game so well. Like, he knows how to drop into space, how to find these channels, how to find these pockets. And I love the goal he scored because literally 10 minutes earlier, he made a similar run, similar dribble, shot at far post, and he just missed. And you're like, oh, that was a good chance. Literally 5 minutes later, he found a way to replicate it. And On the other side for Halifax, there are a few that stood out. I mean, Cavalry is just, he's worth the price of admission. That, I've never seen a number 6 who will get stuck in, will spray the ball, and then he'll get in the final third and do back heel through balls and all this other stuff that he does. He's just a magician. I thought Jake Ruby, he was very fun to watch. It's just in terms of that outside left center back, fullback, just the way he defends and the way he positions himself in 1v1s. He reminds me a lot of a Nashville era Alistair Johnson from a few years ago. So it's a very lofty comparison, of course, but I just see a lot of the same 1v1 defending, a lot of those same abilities from Jake Ruby, and I think he's very underrated in that regard. I think Halifax, they look very good defensively when he's in the lineup. So I thought he was worth giving a shout.
That is a big comparison, but deserved praise for Jake Ruby, who it's good to see back on the pitch after a lot of injury struggles, especially at the start of this year and late last season. And just with Pacific, by the way, something to keep an eye on there with the goalkeeping battle. Kieran Basket playing pretty well these last couple of games that he's had a chance, but obviously Emil Gazdov, also a young player that they have a lot of faith in, so that's one to keep an eye on. But Nigel Reed as well, he spoke after the game, the goal scorer, so let's hear from him.
I feel like when I'm there, I'm a player that could either set them or I can turn and create for my teammates, and I feel like that's what I get from my team. They want to give me the ball, they want me to create, they want me to try and score goals or create for my teammates, and that's what I was trying to do.
Absolutely. AGR, what is next for these two teams as they head into week 8 in the CPL?
Yeah, I mean, it should be a good slate of games. Obviously, for Pacific, they head to Vancouver. They head over to Langley on Friday. That one should be a very fun game. Pacific, they ran out of gas in this game. They kind of admitted as much. Like, look, Canadian Championship took a lot out of it. So, they're going to see a game like this. They're going to see a chance to head into Vancouver and kind of send a message, especially after losing to, the other Vancouver-based team in the Whitecaps, that, hey, we want to keep BC purple. So I'd expect them to be very fired up. Hopefully a great crowd in Langley for that one. And as for Halifax, they get a chance for a bit of revenge, I guess, so to speak, against Ottawa, a team that in week 1, obviously they got a draw and then they got knocked out in the Canadian Championship. So obviously a bit of a chance for revenge over in the nation's capital, in the second meeting of 2 there this season.
That's right. 2 pretty interesting fixtures. I think Pacific heading into Vancouver is always fun. It's an easy one for them to get up for, I think, after having a week break. AGR, thank you so much. As always, everybody can read his analysis at campl.ca and One Soccer. And now we're going to head east to Ontario, and I'll bring in Mitchell Tierney as we head to the capital, where Atletico Ottawa were hosting Forge for the first time since that CPL final. And in the end, a similar result for Ottawa, maybe a better performance. But Mitchell, overall out of 10, what would you give this game?
I'll probably go with a 7. I think the second half especially was intriguing, with two sides who obviously, like you said, have that history there, but especially an Ottawa side who were really, really hungry to get their first home win of the season, and a win that would have been a bit of a game changer for their campaign as well. So I thought there was a lot of exciting chances. A Tristan Henry masterclass, as I'm sure we're going to get into, keeps Forge in it, and then Forge, just really in the match's decisive moment, get the goal.
Absolutely, and I'm realizing that this was actually my match to rate, and I was also going to go with a 7, maybe a 7.5. I think that this was certainly the best game of the weekend for me, at least. Forge playing a pretty interesting back 3 with some rotation in the squad after playing at Montreal in midweek in the Canadian Championship. But as always, as it always seems, they find a way to score that goal at the end. David Chouanière, I mean, who else is going to score a late winner like that for Forge FC? It always seems to be him. And it was an interesting, pretty, maybe not the best Forge performance we've seen, where maybe Ottawa would feel like they'd played better than the Hamilton club in this game. But at the end of the day, it's Forge that come away with everything, all 3 points. But let's hear from Forge's coach, Bobby Smirniotis.
First, it's a tough thing on us, the coaches. The game before, a big game like Wednesday, and the game after. Because you know a lot of times where the players' minds can be, and it's as much as you talk about it, the mind drifts to that cup semi-final and what that can mean going forward. And then, this is a great group to work with because they can refocus very quick. They know the importance of the league, and they know the importance of 3 points every week this year and what that means at the end. And what we're especially happy with is, we've brought in 7 new players that didn't play a lot on Wednesday. Malcolm Duncan's made his debut today also for us this year. And they've gone out there and tactically done the business. A little bit different today in our setup and our shape based on that first game we played against Ottawa. So all around, you're happy when at the end of the game you score a goal and take 3 points away from a very good team here in Ottawa. I think you have to be pleased quite a bit with your team's performance.
Something very new from Forge, I think, in this game, the kind of 3-4-1-2 formation with Noah Jensen sort of playing in that 10 role behind Campbell and Pasillas playing a little bit closer together than normal. But if you look at the bench in this game, Mitchell, I think that's the bench and the players sitting in the press box, like Reza Rama and Alessandro Hajabrapor, that's a team that could, on its own, contend for a championship. Mitchell, what impressed you about Forge and the way they set up in this game?
Yeah, I think that's part of what sets Forge apart is not only the depth, but the ability to know each other, know each other's roles, to be able to be tactically flexible, both in terms of how they can play and where players can play, in terms of, fullbacks playing center back, midfielders playing center back. I mean, just about everyone can play anywhere on the pitch for Forge. So that makes it very helpful when Bobby wants to try something different in a game or facing an opponent. And again, you look at the players they brought off the bench in terms of Tristan Borges, Sissoko, and obviously David Chouanier, who gets the goal. That's something that, really no one else in the league can do to this same extent. And that's going to be a difference maker over the course of a season when there's so many matches and so much, fixture congestion for them. I think that having that ability to just change matches with who they can bring in, change matches within the match in terms of who they want to move around the pitch into different areas is going to, by and large, again, continues to make them the favorites to win the regular season championship.
I think so. But now with all this praise for Forge, it does have to be said that they would not have won this game. In fact, might have lost it, probably would have lost it were it not for their goalkeeper, Tristan Henry. Career high 8 saves. Really, I think for me, one of the best individual goalkeeping performances I've seen in the CPL in 5 years. And obviously Tristan Henry, a guy that's been around at Forge since day one. They a beloved figure in that club and really, really saving them in this game with some of those impressive save with his reflexes, and he was kind of commanding his box very well with the set pieces and all that as well. Carlos Gonzalez after the game pretty much said, yeah, we felt like we'd done enough in this game to win, but it's football sometimes where you just can't put one past the other goalkeeper. So let's hear from the Ottawa coach here.
I have to see the game again, but my feelings are that we couldn't do much more to win the game. I think we did a lot of good things, and this is football sometimes, that you create, that you dominate in certain moments, that you defend well, but in one detail, probably in the only chance in which we made a couple of mistakes in the same action, they score us and they punish us in the minute 91.
So Atletico Ottawa, now that's 4 home games for them, 3 losses and 1 draw. They still have just 1 win on the whole season, and that was that strange 5-0 result out in Vancouver, which I don't know, is certainly one that they'd strive for, but not necessarily the kind of game you'd expect every week. I think Atletico Ottawa is starting to get a little bit frustrated with this home form, especially some of the players taking to social media after the game and apologizing to fans for how this is going. Mitchell, before I ask you about Atletico Ottawa and maybe why you're concerned, let's just hear from Maxime Tissot, who obviously was likewise disappointed after this one.
I think the Canadian Championship game against them, we kind of showed, a bit of fight that was missing in the first few games. The Calgary one was a bit of a one-off, but I think since that Forge game in the Canadian Championship, I think we've shown a different face. I agree. I think today was probably one of our best games. Ultimately, we couldn't put the ball in the back of the net, but yeah, it's a bit of a moral victory. I'm kind of like you. I'm not a big fan of them, but yeah, we go on to the next one and take the positives from this one. But yeah, this one hurts for sure.
Maxime Tissot, not a big fan of moral victories. Mitchell, you've watched them, Atletico Ottawa, pretty closely this year. Do you agree with Maxime that there's progress being made and that this was one of their better performances of the year?
I think so. I mean, they were on the front foot for large parts of that second half. And one of the big issues this year is anytime they've been on the front foot, you can almost guaranteed look up at the scoreboard and they're trailing in the match. So at the very least, I liked a little bit more proactivity in the second half from them to try and get what would be a big result. But again, they don't get that result. And this is just a huge missed opportunity, I think, for the club, where they're playing a tired Forge team who obviously, had such a letdown in midweek. And what an opportunity that would have been for them to transform their season if they can pick up 3 points against, the class of the league, against the team that beat them in the final last year. It would have been so big, that would have been a true morale victory, not a moral victory, which they ended up with, I suppose. But yeah, I think that's what's disappointing. And, there's now a 10-point gap between them and Forge at the top of the table. So now it looks more and more like this is an Ottawa team, maybe fighting for their playoff lives this season instead of pushing the top of the table like they were last season. So that's a little bit disappointing. And yeah, I think that they might have to come to terms with that new reality sooner rather than later.
Yeah, it's tough at this point of the season. It is kind of still early, but we're at the quarter mark here. And I think this is the point of the season where clubs are going to want to start picking up those results. We're getting to a point where progress is probably not going to be enough, and you're going to have to start seeing those results start coming. In terms of picking out a few greats from this game, obviously Tristan Henry is number one, and it almost feels like we shouldn't pick anybody else because he stood out so much above everybody else. But I was impressed by Forge's double pivot. Kyle Becker and Alex Ashiniote Janssen playing in midfield together is always a pretty cool sight to see for this club. It doesn't necessarily happen often, especially not with Noah Jensen on the pitch as well. It's an interesting combination for Forge. I guess we should shout out Malcolm Duncan making his first start for Forge FC in that right wing back role, which isn't necessarily a position that they've even used in lineups very often. But is there anybody else, Mitchell? Maybe there's some Ottawa players that kind of stood out in that second half for you.
Yeah, I mean, I guess other than switching off at the end, Ollie Bassett had a pretty tremendous match. He was creating a lot of those chances that, as aforementioned, were stymied by Tristan Henry. Jean-Daniel Lassie again down the wing provided a lot of threat, and him himself probably could have had a few more better moments in the final third, but came very close. And I guess just an aside, just nice to see Carl Hayworth back out there. And, he almost, again, basically anyone that you can pick on Ottawa almost scored in this match and were stopped by Tristan Henry. But another guy who came so close at the very end. But, just a little bit more experience in the lineup. And I think they could use that at this time of year. So that's a big story for them that he's back.
Absolutely. Absolutely. He's another upstanding figure in this league and for that club, a player that has meant a lot to that city and Atletico Ottawa. So it's definitely good to see him back, and hopefully Carl will be back in the starting lineup pretty soon. But we move on. Up next for these clubs, Forge are playing in midweek again. No time to rest, really. They're back at home for a 9:05 derby against York United, a team that we're going to talk about in a second here, before they head all the way out to Calgary to play Cavalry in, again, never an easy or a low-key or laid-back game as that'll be. So that's, if Forge can get through this little gauntlet here with a few more results, then they may be able to start putting some space between themselves and some other teams, because those are not easy games in pretty quick succession. Ottawa, though, back home again. They play Halifax, as we mentioned earlier, a game where I think they're probably going to be not necessarily treating it as a must win, but kind of.
I mean, it's a big match. It's a big match for sure.
it is a big one for them to be at home. They need that first home result. They've beaten Halifax once this year in that Canadian Championship game at York, but this is a big one for them. So we'll move on from that game, though. We'll stay in Ontario, but before we get to that York game, just a reminder that you can play CPL Predictor, brought to you by Tony Bet at campl.ca/predictor. You pick the scores of games, you can win $20,000. That sounds pretty cool to me. So I would encourage you all to check it out. But now let's go to York Lions Stadium, where York United played Cavalry FC and came away with a 1-0 win in a pretty composed performance for the home side. Mitchell, what would you give this game out of 10?
I'll give it another 7. I think we'll set that as the standard for 1-0 matches this week. It was an intriguing one, though. I mean, you had two sides that were coming off their best result and performance of the season. So obviously, two teams looking to build on that. And I think most weeks Cavalry wins this match. They had the better of the chances. They dominated possession, but the scoreboard ultimately said differently. And an impressive performance from York to build on what they did last week in a very different way. They were able to hold on despite hydration breaks, hot weather, 10 minutes of stoppage time, a few injuries. I was really impressed with how they maintained their focus and fight for a full 100 plus minutes in this match. So that's going to be big for this side who are getting healthier again, who maybe had such a difficult start to the season to get that first home win out of the way, and to do it like this, where it was really a fight from their entire side is something to really build on for them.
Absolutely. I think so. It's a very positive one for York, who maybe are starting to pick up some form, and obviously they're able to keep some players in the lineup in terms of their fitness, which is something that they haven't really been able to say yet this season. So before we get a little bit deeper on York, let's just hear from their head coach, Martin Nash.
It is important. You can create some easy chances that way. I think the next stage for us is figuring when to keep it and when to go. I think we're go a little bit too much for my liking. And we've talked about it. We've worked on it. But it's going to take time to settle in. You can't just go every time, otherwise the game gets a bit of a track meet and then you tire out like we did at the end when they have a lot of possession. So we got to find a nice balance to it where we still create the chances, but we find the moments to keep it when it's not on the go.
It is an interesting take from Martin, right? Where they do have a lot of players in that lineup that are kind of direct, and they like to, as you said, go, like Max Ferrari, Austin Ricci. These are players that love to drive vertically and bring the ball forward and kind of outrun an opposing team, especially opposing fullbacks. Mitchell, what do you make of what Martin Nash says there, and whether York maybe do need to manage those later moments a little bit better?
Yeah, certainly manage the moments, but not take that out of their game, because like you said, they are so well built for it with Lasana Fe, Ricci, Ferrari, Clement Baia, who's excellent in this game. Like, there's so many good wide attacking threats for this side. They have Ozaze Di Rosario, who's really showing well in terms of holding up the ball if they choose to go long and direct. And something I like that they did in this match is they get the ball to Paris G when they had possession, and Cavalry were really shifting so hard to the one side. So they just switch it quickly to the other one, and they had plenty of success doing that, including on the goal. So, I mean, yes, you would like to hold possession better, but you don't want to take out that counterattacking bite. And I do think with some of the guys returning, especially a guy like Jeremy Gagnon-Lapare and Mo Babouli, they'll have some of those tempo setters a little bit more, who will be able to maybe, okay, guys, let's just hold off and play around the back a little bit more here. But yeah, I do think that's the next step in their progression is, okay, let's not just run for the entire 90 minutes. Let's hold off and go to a bit more of a trot sometimes.
Yeah, I think it has to be said that the progression is coming along there at York, and a large part of that is just that they're getting healthier. As I think we mentioned before, this is, I think, the same starting 11 that won in Halifax the weekend before.
Yeah, correct.
Jeremy Gagnon-Lapare comes off the bench. Mo Babouli comes off the bench. When these guys are able to start, this team will feel a lot more confident in its ability, maybe late in games, to have some depth and be able to manage those moments a little bit better. Obviously, we heard from one of those players that was able to start both games, who they're very happy to have back in Morta Kudus after the game. So let's just hear his thoughts.
Yeah, absolutely. I think every team longs for good consistency and things like that. It's obvious, but it's not always as easy in squads in the CPL and things like that. So to get a run of 2 games with not only the same backline but the same starting 11, I think everyone knowing their roles, everyone knowing the same, they're on the same wavelength. We started that Halifax game last week incredibly fast and incredibly aggressive, as I'm sure the league noticed. And the result was fitting. We could have had more last week, but focusing on this week's game, it's refreshing that after a beginning of a lot of injuries and things like that we were carrying, having to rotate and play guys out of position, we were able to field the same 11 twice, and it showed with people knowing their roles, and we didn't give up too much today. Could have scored more as well, especially at the end there, a couple of chances and things like that. So, like I said, I don't think we've been fully fit yet, and now with the competition in the squad, it's raising everyone's levels. And yeah, okay, we played the same team, but there was about 4 or 5 guys on that bench that can start at most CPL teams, if not all, in my opinion. So that's only beneficial for our group.
Tass rocking the mustache there too, which I appreciate. I like that. But Mitchell, how about Cavalry? You wrote after this game that they maybe didn't execute in the big moments that they did have. What did you like? What maybe concerned you about them in this game?
Just quickly on the Tass mustache, he is living with Nico, so apparently that
checks out.
That might have some influence there. In terms of Cavalry, I mean, like I said, most weeks this is probably a good enough performance to get a win. But you've kind of been able to say that about them this entire season in terms of they're doing a lot of things right. But what's been concerning this year for them is the things they're doing wrong. Marco Carducci called it a 95% game where, for 95% of the game, they're on the front foot, they're doing everything right, but it's those 5% little switch offs that they have, especially at the back, where, you look at a club like Forge as an example, and, that's the standard for Cavalry is that top of the table. And they're so proactive when they don't have the ball about thinking about where that next threat might come from. And sometimes don't see that with Cavalry in the same way where, they'll just switch off a little bit. And then you look at the Halifax game as an example where they allow 2 goals in stoppage time. This was another one where, one moment really hurts them. So I think it's ultimately easier to refine a simple detail like that in the long term than, completely having to switch up the way they play. And I think, that's never going to happen under Tommy Wilden Jr. is a complete, change in their style. But I think it's close to there, but that's the next step is really, playing that 100% match, getting all the details right. They did that last week against Ottawa, but, in a very similar match almost, they weren't able to do it against York.
Yeah, speaking of hundreds, we will hear from Marco Carducci a little bit later. But first, let's just go back to York Lions Stadium and get the thoughts of their coach, Tommy Wilden Jr.
I do think we've got to keep more clean sheets. Last week we did it. We've made 1 defensive error today and got punished for it. I think that's it. But I said I can't fault the spirit of the lads. It's a very hot day, and we kept going and we kept going. So I think we've topped every single statistic in today's game. That shows the manner in which we're playing, other than the one that's most important, and that's the scoreline. But I'm not going to change what we're doing in terms of how we want to play this game. We'll get more points playing that way than we will just sitting low and playing on the counter. That's not in our DNA.
As always, Cavalry are very committed to their footballing identity, and I think that's always something that's impressed me about them. But Mitch, how about your greats from this game? Any players in particular that stood out above the rest for you?
Yeah, definitely a few on the York side. We mentioned Clément Bailly, just a player with relentless energy throughout this match. I mean, late in the match and, whatever it was, 90+8, he's still bursting down the field and behind the Cavalry back line and creating chances. That was important to the match because, Cavalry, they have these really attacking minded players who on the wings who get forward. So he was able to get in behind of them and create some havoc. And I thought Lassana Faye is a player who's really starting to come into his own out wide. He had a bit of a tricky start with York, but now he's really starting to, especially going forward, can play a great ball through the lines. Paris G, a player who's played in multiple positions this season, but sometimes it's, he's serviceable in multiple places. He's been excellent, whether it's center back, both full back positions. He played as a center mid at one point. you know, this is a guy who's, especially with their injuries, been so important. So that's another guy who I think deserves a lot of credit. And then Ali Musi on Cavalry, I think, you know, in a match where they lose, he still creates 4 chances. He has 3 shot attempts. I mean, he was everywhere. He was so unlucky to not get on the score sheet in this match. And yeah, another fantastic performance from him.
Absolutely. You know, Ali Musi, you know, to get into the team of the week in a losing effort, pretty impressive from him. But I think there are also quite a few York guys in there this week. You'll see that later on Monday. But before we move on to what's next for these teams, Mitchell, you had a chance to catch up with Paris G after the game. So let's hear from him.
Post-game reaction presented by Allstate, joined here with York United's Paris G. Paris, first home victory of the season for you guys. Yeah. How do you feel about it?
Special. The first one's always good. The guys have come together really well over the last week, even when we started in Halifax, and man, we're excited to come back home again and get another win.
Interesting stat heading into this match. You guys were one of 5 teams so far in the league that hadn't picked up a home victory so far. What do you think it is about that the league's so close and, you know, anyone can win on any given day?
Everything's really tight right now. You can see, like, even from I don't know what, from 7th all the way to, I guess, now where we are, it's tight. It's tight, and I don't know. I'm just roaring. I'm just so excited for this win right now.
That's awesome. You've played a number of different roles today at center back. Obviously, you know, fullback is the position you started at, but you're able to use the kind of long diagonal balls from the back to play out. What is it about that, and how important was that to today's victory?
You know, we had to move the ball quick. Whenever a team would slide over, I got to be good with my ping out wide, and I think Nash trusts me sliding into that center back role. But wherever he needs to put me on the field, I know he can trust me. I just got to put in the work and do my job. And today we put in the job and kept a clean sheet and came out with a win.
And with that being said, you know, you guys were able to roll out the same 11 again. You saw Jeremy, Mo get back off the bench. You know, with so many games coming up, how important is that to get healthy again? And I guess the competition at multiple positions.
Oh yeah, it's great to round out the squad. Now we have quality guys coming off the bench, like Nashi says, and now rolling into Wednesday and rolling into Saturday, like we have a full team. So we're ecstatic for it.
And, you know, 2 wins on the trot, 2 clean sheets on the trot. How confident are you guys heading into the league leaders?
We're feeling good. We're feeling really good. We know it's going to be a battle. When we go to Forge, it's always a battle. The wind also plays a factor there too. We know it's going to be hot. So I think for us, we just got to come in with the same mentality we came in for this game and grind and work and go to war.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Paris.
Thanks.
As Paris mentioned, a tough one coming up for them at Forge. Mitchell, just walk us through where these 2 teams go from here.
Yeah, like you said, just they just ended one team's undefeated run, so they get to play the other undefeated team in the league, the last undefeated team in the league, in Forge on the road. That'll be a really big test for them. But like Paris said, I think one that they are and should be up for, considering how they played recently. And then, interestingly enough, Cavalry, they also play Forge next at Atco Field. Right. So a lot of Forge going around, a lot of tests for both these sides. York also have Valor at the weekend. So busy schedule, busy June for them. So we'll learn a lot about this York United side, I think, over the next coming weeks.
We certainly will. A test for them, I think, is definitely the way to put it. Hopefully these guys continue to get healthier and they don't have any other issues that pop up, and we can see the full picture of what Martin Nash is trying to build there at York United. Okay, so before we go, let's just take a look at the standings as they are after week 7. We obviously Forge now 3 points clear at the top of the table, still undefeated, all the way down to Atletico Ottawa, unfortunately, at the bottom of the table. Mitchell, is there anything in the table that's surprising you so far?
Oh, sorry, I got taken out for a second there. I think, like we said, Ottawa at the bottom of the table is probably the big surprise. And maybe with how they've started, how quickly York's been able to climb back up the table. But again, it's just so close at this stage. Other than the top, 2 who have kind of separated themselves a little bit, 3 to even the bottom is just so close. So I guess that's been slightly surprising.
Absolutely. Producer Benedict did not want to hear your thoughts.
No, he really didn't.
But unfortunately for him, we got them anyway. So let's just take a look one more time at the schedule. Obviously on Wednesday, Forge taking on York United at 7:00 Eastern. And then on the weekend, we have our usual slate of 4 matches starting on Friday night when Vancouver hosts Pacific. And on Saturday, our doubleheader, including the TonyBet Match of the Week, Cavalry and Forge, as certainly one that we always look forward to, followed by Ottawa and Halifax Wanderers at 7 o'clock Eastern. And then Sunday will wrap up the weekend for us in week 8 when Valor hosts York United. As always, all of those games available to watch on One Soccer and Fubo.tv and TELUS Channel 980. Now, to finish off the show this week, we have a bit of a special video here. We want to, as we often do, we celebrate the CPL players who stick around as faces of this league. And Marco Carducci this weekend was the first Cavalry FC player to make 100 appearances for that club. He's the captain. He's been there since day one. Honestly, there couldn't be a more fitting player, I think, to have that honor. And I had the honor of going up to spend some time with Cavalry on the weekend and hearing from some of their players and coaches about what Marco means to that club. So with that, I will bid you farewell, and I'll allow some far more well-spoken voices of Marco and some of his teammates and Tommy Wilden Jr. to see us out.
For it to be here with Cavalry obviously means a lot to me. I think at this point it goes without saying the connection that I have with this club, and to be able to be the first guy to do it here is extra special. To have kind of been fostered by what the club and the league has brought to professional football in Calgary, but in the country. For me, it was at a really pivotal time. I was needing a place to play and needing that opportunity, and it's done so much for me. And in return, I hope that I've just been able to kind of give back. Now to be one of the originals and a captain on this team and a big part of the club, it means so much, and again, it's still a bit surreal.
He's number one on his shirt, but he's number one in a lot of people's hearts, and I think he captures the hearts and minds of the teammates in front of him and the fan base around him. He works with kids sport, he works with the PFA. He gives a lot. So for him to be recognised as the player he is pretty special too. He's just a natural leader. There's intelligence behind what he says. There's empathy in what he says. He makes people feel good. He doesn't cut people down. And I think that's what you want in a modern leader. He epitomizes the values of our club.
The fans love him. The community loves him. We love him. He's a great person, a great friend, and just a great teammate. This club is number one in his heart. He lives and breathes Calgary. He comes in every day expecting to help the game grow in our city, and you can see that with the way he handles himself.
Marco is one of those guys, he has to speak to lead one group. To be honest, he's always with the examples and those things, but when Marco speak, everybody has to listen, because it's not many times that happen, right? So it's one of those guys, and that's why everybody respects him.
I'm excited to cap off 100 games, and we'll see how many more from there.